Excuse me. Oh, I don't know. That was like a burp and like a hiccup and me trying to talk at the same time and then woo. That's how I'm going to tell the whole story. All right. So, I don't remember when exactly I started seriously entertaining the idea of being a hustler, but I do remember the solicitous messages that I frequently received when I logged onto my local AOL M4M chat room. The messages were invariably from older men and contained exactly two levels of decorum. There were the men who described themselves as generous, and then there were the men who described themselves as generous, with a $sign instead of an S. At first, I ignored those messages. I didn't need the money, and I didn't need an excuse to have sex with people who I didn't find attractive. I was just coming out of my awkward teens, and if someone complimented me on my looks, I felt so grateful that it only seemed fair to at least give the guy a blowjob. The luxury of saying no belonged to other people. That began to change as I inched towards my 21st birthday. I chanced upon a job as the doorman at the only gay bar in the Hudson Valley, and for the first time in my life, discovered that I was a much sought-after crush object. I was young, fresh-faced, 10 pounds underweight, and I often paired tiny, brightly colored t-shirts with ludicrously oversized blue jeans. I was, as they are called in the gay male community, a twink. A cherished and coveted caricature of slender boyishness that continues to fuel XXX membership websites to this day. Seemingly overnight, I became the thing I could never be in high school. Sexy and popular. The luxury of saying no finally belonged to me, but it wasn't a luxury I indulged. I was so happy to occupy the upper echelons of my podunk scene that I celebrated by sleeping with nearly all of my hot new friends in succession. It was that intoxicating. It was around that time, at the height of my micro-celebrity, that I finally responded to one of those so-called generous men who had propositioned me in the internet chat rooms. I still didn't need the money, but now that I essentially had and had taken my pick of the hotties, I did now need an excuse to sleep with unattractive men. The attention of these desperate avatars with their pleading, smiley emoticons and poorly veiled innuendo meant even more to me than that of my peers on the bar scene, because these men wanted me so bad they were willing to pay me. So I gave in. I picked a guy at random, agreed on a price, and set up a meeting. And that's all I remember. I don't know if we talked about the specifics of what we would be doing or if we set up any ground rules, and I'm pretty sure I didn't even ask for a picture. What did it matter? It was some guy who was going to pay me for my body, and I would make money just by virtue of existing in his space. I was so smug. I anticipated that he would simply bathe in the glowing light of my naked form and then give me cash. My imagination completely failed to supply me with even a hint of the unpleasant possibilities. I thought he would be as I had been before my transformation, insecure and grateful for any scrap of fleshy attention I would deign to bestow upon him. I didn't consider the customer service aspect of hooking at the time. The big day arrived, and I drove my 92 Geo Prism to Poughkeepsie, where I called my John on a public phone around the corner from where he lived so that he would come meet me. He did. And as I followed him up the steps to his third floor walk-up, I found that even though I had no expectations for how he would look, I was flummoxed by his resemblance to a very famous figure. Who knew that somewhere in upstate New York, above the ground, there lived a dead ringer for Danny DeVito as the Penguin in the movie Batman Returns. It's too much celebrity glamour for me right off the bat. I had braced myself for ugly, but I was not ready for supervillain. Nonetheless, it was too late to turn back. I followed my John, the Penguin, up to his apartment and into a bland, grayish, carpeted living room where the Dave Matthews Band song, The Space Between, was playing on a loop. Wasting no time for pleasantries, the man opened the door to his bedroom and gestured inside, and it was then that I finally hesitated. I asked him for the money first. Apparently that was a faux pas because he got really grumpy all of a sudden and he snapped at me that I wouldn't get the money until after. It began to dawn on me at that moment that there would be no free dinner, no fawning over me, no courtship. That, duh, was the whole point. We weren't on a date. I followed him into his room and looked around me. It was nightmarish. And not in the underground lair sense. No. This room was a nightmare tailor-made just for me. It was a Catholic nightmare, with framed paintings of Jesus Christ and all the saints covering every inch of the walls that weren't already occupied by a crucifix or a rosary. Holy Mother Mary candles perched on the dresser, praying with dozens of sets of pressed-together palms that I reconsider my folly. And each flickering flame was another Holy Spirit damning me to hell before I had even taken off my sneakers. Look at us spin out in the madness of a roller coaster, observed Dave Matthews from the other room. I turned to my right and saw a small television set facing the bed. Grainy 1980s era gay porn was playing silently on the screen. The space between right and wrong clearly delineated in the bikini-bottom tan lines splayed out in front of me. And here, in this bedroom chapel, before God and man, I was about to cross those tan lines. You know, you went off like a devil in the church in the middle of a crowded room. And then the door shut, and Dave Matthews left me alone with my John, the penguin, a sad-looking man who had purchased my time and was about to collect. I stood frozen where I was. He gestured to the holy walls. I used to be a drug addict and an alcoholic, he told me, until I found Jesus. Now I'm a substance abuse counselor, and I couldn't have done it without Christ. His disclosure succeeded in making him less villainous to me, but as he began to undress, I did not find myself aroused at all. I was more curious than anything. Who was this guy? And how could he bring himself to have sex in front of his religious icons? Did he think they liked to watch? I didn't have much time to contemplate before the man sat down and patted the bed for me to follow suit. The encounter was brief and completely unexceptional. He kept his socks on. I didn't. Afterwards, he pressed 4 $20 bills into my palm and sent me on my way. I never saw him again. I spent the money almost immediately on t-shirts from H&M. And tried to put the experience out of my mind. I didn't feel violated or dirty, so much as I felt just generally let down. Like the candles in my John's room, I had been there as a prop, to assume a temporary meaning before being discarded and replaced. I was there to be a twink. And if that was all there was to my identity, that was all there was to me. There had been a thrill in that, in knowing that my sexual objectification provided a distinct purpose for me in people's minds. But discovering that I was a piss-poor hustler reminded me that other people didn't really know how I fit into the scheme of things and could only guess at my identity, or make it up for themselves. By coincidence, I got my palm read a week later, idly running the left thumbnail of my free hand across the inseam of my cutoffs as my friend's roommate looked up at me ominously and informed me that I had hooked up with someone I shouldn't have, and that he saw disease? No, not disease, but something else. Only my pediatrician knew for sure. He wrote a prescription, which I exchanged at the pharmacy for a special shampoo. It came in a small blue bottle that outlined its purpose and its direction in clear black letters printed on a white label. It was unmistakably itself. Thank you.